You're listening to episode 39, Smokey and the Bandit, directed by Hal Needham. Is it an American classic? Let's find out on this episode of Video Vila Podcast. Thank you guys for joining us today. With the turn of events, we are bringing you guys Smokey and the Bandit. I have no idea what we were going to bring you because Logan pulled it before we did.
So, yeah, okay.
Maybe a future episode.
Yeah,
I don't know.
We'll probably definitely come back to it for a future episode. But story time. I had an idea of...
Starting right off into a story time.
Okay. Okay. I had an idea of a movie that I thought that maybe Becca would like that I watched, but it wasn't a movie that typically movies here, like, I'm a big fan of and I've been watching them for years and so forth. But this movie was more of a newer movie that I become a fan of. And I was like, okay, well, I kind of want to try to do some that are maybe like movies that I haven't loved for a long period of time, but I've recently watched them that are still older, but that I do like. And I was like, okay, well, I think Becca will like this one. And it was a horror movie. But so, with me doing research and watching that movie on Saturday before we did this episode, we were trying to figure out what to watch because that usually, I don't know if any of you guys can't ever figure out what to watch on Saturdays when y'all want to come up with one thing, but it's a battle between us.
I more so just want something on the TV so I can eat my dinner already.
I just want I want the perfect movie to watch into the weekend, and I want
into the weekend. Then you should do that on Friday.
I know that's what I'm gonna start doing. I'm gonna start looking them up on Friday and figure out what we're gonna watch on Saturday.
Okay.
But I put on Smokey and the Bandit because it's been years since I've seen it, and I just had for some reason
I'd never seen it before.
There was some reason I wanted to watch this movie, and we had nothing but a great time.
So our cat just came in off screen. She has stuff all down her back. I don't know where she was.
Well, I don't know. I'm not dealing with that right now.
It's above my pay grade.
But yeah, we watched it and we had nothing but a blast watching it.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, I think let's switch it. Let's do a U-turn and let's do Smokey and the Bandit.
Yeah.
This movie is so... I use great, awesome, amazing words all the time.
I love it. It's my favorite.
I'm not going to say it's my favorite because I have seen Smokey and Bandit. It is a classic. It literally is, with whatever the tagline is for them. Is it American classic? I really do. I really strongly think this movie is a classic.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to while we break down the movie, we're going to get into more of the details and stuff like that behind it. But it is a fantastic movie. And it is kind of like one of those movies that you don't really think about a lot. I mean, back then.
Or at all.
Well, true, yeah. Back then in 1977 and to the 80s and stuff like that, Smokey and the Bandit was a big deal. I mean, this was a humongous success. And as a kid in the 90s, growing up in the 90s, there are still movies that are considered classics that you remember or knew about because those were movies that your parents watched. And then your parents loved them, so then they shared them with you. And that's what this was in our household. This is going to be episode I really want my mom to listen to, so I'm going to try to make it PG-13. Hold back on the swear words.
That's pretty easy to do.
Yeah.
For this one.
Yeah, definitely. This movie I grew up with it. Obviously, I am from the South. I'm from Tennessee. Smokey and Bandit was a huge thing in Tennessee. I mean, there's multiple people. I've watched couple documentaries, before taping this and stuff like that, because I really want to get in the information behind the movie and stuff like that. I kind of learned a little bit more because I knew it was a big success. The budget for the movie was not even $5 million, and it made over $127 million. That's that's humongous. It's ridiculous to think that's all the movie cost. Mind you, out of that 4 million, Burt got a million of it. So you're looking at a little bit over 3 million left over to make the movie. And it's crazy. I mean, we got first time director, Hal Needham. He was probably one of the most famous stuntmen of all time. I mean, you know, a lot of people know Evel Knievel as a household name,
Yeah.
but Hal Needham was the guy. He was the most paid and highest paid stuntman for the longest time. And he basically was working on a film with being Burt Reynolds' stuntman. And he came up with the idea to start to work on Smokey and the Bandit. And now we do get that, like, that's not a super big thing to happen where like the stuntman turns director and so forth. I mean, a lot of people current times, we got the John Wick franchise, obviously, where, you know, stuntman turned director, and that's a very successful franchise. But this was back in the 70s. And now and it was also in the US. Now it was very common back in like the Chinese martial arts films for the stuntmen to also be a director because they know how to shoot the stunt scenes because they're also stuntmen themselves. But far as like US, this was at the time was very uncommon for that to happen. Also, you got to look at it, the fact that Hal Needham had no experience on behind the camera, only in front of the camera. And it is an incredible story. I'm going to break down some more awesome fun facts, but if you got the time on YouTube, CMT, or say it's CTM, which was the country music station, CMT?
Yeah, CMT, I think.
Yeah, CMT, country music station. Yeah. Country music television. Yeah, CMT made a great documentary back in like 2016 called The Bandit. Watch it. I'm telling you, if there's going to be some homework for this episode, that is it. I mean, it's a great documentary and it's awesome. And I swear, if you go back and watch that, you're going to thank me because it's out of documentary, especially for a made for TV documentary on the country music station. I mean, it's phenomenal. It's awesome. I mean, it's better than some of the, you know, hoity-toity documentaries you would see like on HBO. But I mean, what did you think about the movie? Because I really don't think we have to wait till the end to ask back on this one.
Oh, I actually really liked it. Like,
Yeah.
I was actually, so normally when we watch movies back, I go to sleep halfway through because we watch them like later at night. And this one, like I said today, I was like, I'm kind of bummed that like I fell asleep halfway through it last night.
The
'Cause it
second
is
viewing, yeah.
Yeah, the second viewing, not the first viewing. Okay, I'm not gonna wing it that hard. I have, but yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed it. It's really funny. I really like the chemistry between Bandit and Carrie, or Bandit and Frog, whatever you want to call her. Because that meant that their banter back and forth was really, really good as well. And they were just pleasant to watch, as well as the friendship between Bandit and Snowman. Yeah, Cletus.
So that's okay. So I'm glad
That's okay. I'm
No.
glad to. That is it's okay to like the movie.
I
It's
didn't
even better if you hate it.
I didn't mean that. What I was saying is, I'm glad you brought that up because this movie, now, like I said, Hal Needham, first time director, he wrote the script back in 75, I believe it was, when he was working on Gator. Gator was a movie that where he was, like I said, he was being Burt Reynolds' stunt double. And he got the idea because while they were shooting that film, they were in Georgia and they had some cores delivered to them and they were drinking them. But then they kept them in their suites that they were staying in while they were filming. And they noticed they were going missing much faster than the way they can drink them. And they're like, okay, I don't understand what's going on here because we're going through these and I'm not drinking as much as we're going through them. Then come find out the maids, they're tidying up their little place they were staying at or taking them. And they just kind of like went up to him. They were like, hey, I mean, is it what's going on here? Like, I mean, like, why are you spilling beer? And they were like, oh, you can't get these down here. I can get $20 a 6-pack for these. And they didn't think anything of it. Wasn't like, you know, like they just thought, you know, okay, they'll just take them from the fridge or whatever. And then that's where they got the idea. It was like, how about we make a movie about that? Because then they looked into it, and you looked into it, right?
Yeah.
What did you find when you looked into it?
So originally Coors was, I guess, manufactured in Colorado or came from Colorado, and it wasn't pasteurized, nor did it have any preservatives in it. So I don't know if it had to do with like making sure the beer didn't go stale before it traveled, so it could only go in so far of a radius. Like I don't know if that's why, but pretty much it was made in Colorado and it had no preservatives in it. So my understanding is it wouldn't really last that long anyway in a truck for that many miles. And two, it also was not pasteurized. So there were a few states where it just wasn't legal to sell Coors.
Yeah, and that's basically you get to that point is that's where they get the idea of this being bootlegged,
Yeah.
basically. Um, and with that being said, like they looked into it and that's what they found. And and so like literally while Hal is working on Gator, in between his scenes, he's in his little area, his little room and stuff like that, and he's going away at a screenplay. And mind you, like it sucks because this guy so freaking cool. Hal Needham was such a badass. So freaking cool. I mean, something about the 70s and even Burt Reynolds, like these people were like, I don't know, being a movie star in the 70s in that time frame, like in the 60s and 70s, it was just different. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like movie stars had like this certain swagger and they were put on a pedestal, but not because, like they were gods, but it's because people liked them. People, you know, googly eyed over them and stuff like that. Like there's just, it was just, I don't know. It's just weird. Like, to see like almost like kind of I think of like Beatlemania and stuff like
Mhm.
that. Like literally, like at that time, actors during that time era were almost sought after, like looked after like that.
Yeah.
If that's the best thing I can come up with, like to be, for concept. Um, but he was such a cool dude. And the thing is, while he's coming up with this idea to make this movie, everyone around him is saying like, "All right, good luck." You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And he has such a crazy backstory. He literally was just a nobody from a farm working as a shear crop grower. And there's funny thing, like there's this one interview where they were asking, like, well, what did you do for fun when you were working on the farm and stuff? Like, would you have any hobbies? And he was like, hobbies? Obviously, you never been a sheer crop
Yeah.
grower any before. And you don't know what that is because you
Yeah.
don't have hobbies.
Yeah.
You're lucky just to put food on the table.
Mhm.
You work all day. He didn't even have a high school education.
Yeah.
And the thing is that unfortunately people bring that up a lot um, throughout these like documentaries and stuff like that, and talking about like, yeah, he was a very simple man, but he was a very intelligent man without having an education. He wasn't.
Mhm.
They keep on like, well, he wasn't a scholar and stuff, and like it sucks because like when people say that, I find that kind of insulting. It's like,
Oh, yeah.
well, you don't need to say that. Like,
Yeah.
what does education have anything to do with this? If this man's aspect of his
Yeah, because
life.
at the end of the day, it's like real world knowledge and no education, really, truly, especially mainstream education or collegiate education is going to teach you that.
Exactly, and that's one thing. It's like the one thing that they said about him was one person that worked on the movie. They's like, I never seen someone do so much with so little in my
Yeah.
life as Hal Needham. And then so basically he enlisted in the military to get out of being working as a farmer.
Mhm.
He spent his 2 years in there, and he was in the he was a jumper and so forth. And he didn't like the way he was being treated in the military. He didn't feel like he was being valued for what all the hard work he was doing. And soon he got the opportunity to leave. He did, and he said, "That's it. I'm going somewhere so I can make a name for myself." And he went straight out to Hollywood, and ended up getting a job as a stuntman. Never been a stuntman before, but he's like, you know what? I've got the experience of being in the military. I know how to jump out of
Yeah.
planes and stuff like that, and land in parachutes. I think I can do this, and just started to rise up because he was doing stuff that a lot of people weren't doing back then.
Yeah.
He holds a world record for like the longest jump on a boat. Did that during Gator. And during this is when he became good buddies with um, Burt Reynolds, and he became Burt Reynolds' stuntman. And I was, like I said, y'all, that documentary shows their relationship. Okay, so during their friendship, before Smokey and the Bandit, he basically had told Bert, he's like, listen here, man, I gotta find a place to stay or something like that. So and so just kicked me out. I don't have anywhere to live. And Bert goes, that's fine. At the time, Bert was he was the biggest dude in TV at that time. Bert's career was mainly a lot of TV shows, but he did really well and everything. I mean, I mean, Gunsmoke was probably one of the probably most popular show he was on. And then he went into doing movies where he plays a character like a good old boy character, where basically he's kind of like in between the right side, like not the wrong side of the law, but in between the right and the wrong side of the law. But everyone loved him and so forth in the town, and then some kind of like crazy stuff excused, and like he is crazy, drives crazy and cool fast cars and so forth, kind of like Smokey and the Bandit. But that's what he got his career doing, and so he was really pretty wealthy at the time, and he was like, "Well, that's fine, man." He's like, "Just live with me. I got 6 bedrooms. That's fine." And literally,
No big
he,
deal.
he lived with him for 12 years.
Mm.
And because there was no need for him to move out, their friendship was so close. Burt Reynolds said, he's like, if he was a woman, we would have one hell of a marriage. Like literally, he said, nobody in Hollywood has said that they would ever work closer than Hal and Burt.
Mm-hmm.
It's a beautiful story. Like I said, if you get the chance, watch it. It is fantastic. But so when he got the idea for the movie, he basically was going to make it for kind of like a low budget exploitation film. And it was just going to be he was going to probably use about like $1 million or whatever, So like he wrote the script, and at that point in time, no one was going to let him do it. So that's why he was going for like a low budget exploitation film and sell it there, and then try to make it that way. AIP was the original company that he was trying to sell it to, but he let Burt read the script because Burt was interested. He's like, "Oh, well, let me read it," and Burt told him, like, "Listen here, I'll do it, and you can use my name to get it made. Go take it around to some better studios and so forth and get the money, and I promise you I'll be in it." And that's exactly what he did. And mind you, at that time, Bert's name was gold.
Mm-hmm.
It was like, oh, Burt Reynolds attached to it. So that's when Universal ended up picking it up, and then they went away and started, greenlit it to be made. And that was also another cool thing is they were going to try to switch out the director. And Burton was like, no, the only person that could direct this film is Hal Needham. That's it. And they end up going with it. They at that point in time, they looked at it as like, okay, they're going to gave him $5 million, but then they took $1 million away.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll end up with $4 million, but in their eyes it was like $4 million's nothing. You know what I mean? We
Yeah.
can throw this away if it have to be. And like I said, who knew it would be $127 million.
Yeah.
And then when Burt signed on, because they originally were going to have Jerry Reed, Snowman, he was actually going to be Bandit. So then Hal had to tell Jerry, he's like, hey, so Burt said he's going to be Bandit. Are you okay with that? He was completely cool with it.
Yeah.
And he got to be Snowman. But yeah, I think this movie it's fantastic. There's so much stuff to talk about. Well, I would say probably I could go on for hours, but one thing I would like to add before we can, like, if you want to start talking about the movie, but so Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so we watched that. Becca actually liked it
Yeah.
and stuff.
I like the aesthetic of it.
Yeah. But so, Leonardo DiCaprio's character and Brad Pitt's character, that was loosely based off of the relationship that Burt Reynolds and Hal Needham had.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, there's a fictitious story that's circling around that, but the premise is basically Burt Reynolds and Hal Needham, which is really, really cool because Quentin Tarantino's humongous Burt Reynolds fan, and he actually had Burt Reynolds casted in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. But unfortunately, before they started shooting is when Burt passed away. So they had to change his character out, unfortunately. But Quentin Tarantino writes a lot about this, I think, in his book.
Mm.
But yeah, it's crazy the fact that like, you know, I never knew any of that until looking in the research in the movie because I never knew there was like, you know, like a correlation between, you know, real life and, you know, the storyline that he because you know, Quentin does that a lot. He'll pull stuff from other things and make a whole new wrap around and make a whole new story out of it, but he used a lot of inspiration from real life events or
Mhm.
something like that. He'll literally copy something and then flip it, but he acknowledges that he copied it and explains where he got it from and what his how he chose to like retell something or
Mhm.
reshoot something. But yeah, like I mean, I like I said, I can go on for a while breaking down
Usually
this.
you can.
There's well, I'm just saying this is so much cool stuff behind
Yeah.
this movie. And like I said, this movie is just it's just cool.
Mhm.
Like I'm not a car guy. You know, I mean, Becca knows I'm not a super big car guy, but I love watching cars go fast. I
Yeah.
don't know what it is. I just like, especially when cars crash. Now, I don't want anyone. I don't want like. I don't like see people car crashes on the side of the road. And be like, oh God, and like you know, get
Well,
excited
yeah,
over that.
no, but I get what you're saying.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
like the theater side of it.
yeah. Exactly. I love like you know we talk about like Beverly Hills Cop 1 and 2, the awesome car crashes and stuff like that. And that one. Um, so like that's something that I really do enjoy. And this movie
You
has
also really enjoyed what's the Kurt Russell one in Chinatown?
Big Trouble in Little China.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that was there's a little bit less driving and stuff like that one. But there is a little bit fun one with the bus and stuff like
Yeah.
that. So yeah. But yeah, I mean, I will pause here
And kick it off
and
to me.
yeah,
Here we go.
Becca's gonna read the back of the VHS for us.
Like usual. All right. One of the all-time box office hits, Smokey and the Bandit, stars Burt Reynolds and Jackie Gleason in an outrageous comedy that boasts full-throttle laughs and high-velocity thrills. Reynolds is the bandit, a king-of-the-road trucker hero who accepts the ultimate challenge. Pick up a truckload of Coors beer in Texarkana, the closest place it can be legally sold, and haul it cross-country to Atlanta in 28 hours. The reward, $80,000. The result, the wildest series of car chases ever filmed. The reason, a Texas Smokey, Sheriff Buford T. Justice, which is Gleason, becomes manically obsessed with apprehending the elusive bandit when he joins forces with Smokey's son, Runaway's bride, Sally Field. I thought it was Fields.
I mean, I always said Sally Fields, but I guess it is Field probably.
Interesting. So, anyways, the movie kicks off at pretty much another trucker's journey with
Yeah.
a fleet full of Coors beers. And this trucker, the movie picks up where he gets pulled over and they're like, all right, do you have your registration? Do you have this? And then they ask him like, all right, well, let's see, you know, what you have in the back. And he opens it up and it's Coors. So they let him know that that's bootlegging. You can't, you know, have Coors in the area that you're at. And so you're going to get a ticket. And then... Good.
No, yeah, and so when this is when we find out that basically this guy who's attempting to do this has been set up by the Big and Little
Enos.
Enos brothers.
Yeah.
Which is funny because
Is it brothers or son?
I thought they were brothers. It could be son, but it's just, I guess
Nonetheless, there's big and there's little.
Yeah. But yeah, they basically we let know. Okay, they set him up with it. Basically, is a undoable task.
Yeah.
Like they was like, oh, you've been set up.
Goal.
Yeah, you've been set up because those boys been doing that prank for years, and no one's ever been able to do it. Fast forward to a little bit later.
Yeah. So ultimately, then so Little and Big Enos set that guy up. And you pan over, and they are at another trucker hall where it's some sort of event with truckers.
Yeah, it's
and
like a truck radio.
Yeah.
Rodeo,
yeah. And they're out there pretty much like scheming, essentially, for the next person to task with this job.
Yeah, and now, mind you, at this time, they are looking for the bandit because we're getting little by little, like, he is a well-known person.
Yeah.
People know who
Well,
the
yeah, because
bandit
when they
is.
do find him, he's sleeping in a hammock, and you see little signs on the tree that are like,
M
pay for pictures or
Yeah,
autographs and this,
yeah,
that, and the other.
yeah, and mind you, this is like I said, but people like CB radios, they would
Yeah.
listen to these things that the bandit would get into, and that's why he's a legend.
So, like I said, they Big and Little Enos, which I also read something on the internet that like that's a spinoff of Anus. At least in the article, every time it said like in parentheses, like say the names out loud. I don't know if that was intentional or that's just, journalism. People just
Mhm.
took a kick out of it. Anyway, so they find him and he is snoozing away in a hammock off to the side of the truck rodeo. And they ultimately wake him up and introduce themselves. Which
Yeah, it's funny because apparently that shot of Bert waking up is, I guess that's the first time him seeing them in their suits. So that's
Oh yeah,
actual
mind you, they're
legit.
matching like teal suits and
Yeah,
stuff.
that's actually I think I don't know if they're zoot suits. I don't know. But they look very familiar to something like that.
Yeah.
And he's he busts out laughing and he makes fun. He's like, oh, I didn't know those suits came in extra fat, a 68 extra fat and a 12th dwarf.
Yeah.
Movie's funny. The thing is, the movie is got a lot of one-liners and quips,
Yeah.
which is
It's banter like focus.
but it's great because there wasn't a lot of script.
Yeah.
This the dialogue was awful. Basically, Burt Reynolds said so. They changed up the dialogue, but the storyline was what actually sold Burt.
Mm-hmm.
They said 80% of this movie is all like improvised. There was no script. There was no lines. They were just, this is what you're doing. This is what you're doing. Here's some concepts. Go with it.
Yeah. So they bring up the idea to Bert after they wake him up, and there's some banter back and forth. And well, they tell him that they have a task for him, and I believe like the very first quote they give him is $80,000, and that's when Bert's like, "That's chicken shit money."
No, he's going to get $5,000 for if he wins the rodeo,
okay.
and that's when they're like, he's like, and the little one's like, that's chicken shit money.
Oh,
Yeah,
I swapped those.
yeah.
Anyways, so they bring up to Bandit that they have an offer for him, which is the goal to go all the way to Texarkana, get 400 cases of Coors beer, and make it back within 28 hours. So that's 900 miles to Texarkana and then 900 miles back to Atlanta, Georgia. And they have 28 hours to do it, essentially, without getting caught by the cops and also meeting their deadline.
And that's the thing is like they know he's going to take it because he can't turn down a challenge.
Yeah.
And that's the thing is because like he's never lost.
Mhm.
Him and Snowman, the duo has never lost. So they kind of know they got him hook, line, and sinker.
Yeah.
But it's really cool because like then after this we actually move forward and we got to get the Snowman, which is Jerry Reed, which we've seen. We've actually watched another movie with him. Do you guess what Adam Sandler movie he's in?
I have no idea.
He's the Water Boy.
Oh.
He's in the Water Boy. Water Boy, you're fired. That's Jerry Reed.
Yeah. So of course Bandit accepts it, but he has to head off to Cletus, who is Snowman, to tell him because he's not going to do this alone. And so he just bursts into Cletus' house, and Cletus' wife has her curlers in.
She doesn't want him
there.
there.
Running around, yeah,
because he's trouble.
Yeah, so she pretty much like huffs and puffs about it being in there. Cletus is sleeping in bed, and I mentioned to Logan that was funny because he just ultimately he doesn't climb on top of Cletus, but he's like leaning over him in the bed trying to wake him up and stuff.
He's very close to
him. Yeah. And wakes him up, and he's trying to tell him that we got a task to do. It's $80,000, and Cletus is like, "Well, I got to go move manure for so and so." And Cletus is like, "Well, that's a shitty job."
Well, Bandit's like, "That's a shitty job."
Sorry, Bandit's like, "That's a shitty job," and just continues to carry on about what they're actually going to do, essentially, and that he has it all set up and all figured out. So they got to do it. He can't do it without him.
Yeah, basically, he once he thinks about that $80,000, he's like, all right, because he almost says like that's impossible. He's like, it's not impossible. It's just impossible because we haven't done it yet.
Yeah.
So he ends up basically getting the snowman to accept. And he is basically going to load up his truck and bring Fred with him. And now we get introduction to the fancy fast car that he said he would need to be the blocker.
Yeah.
The blocker basically being a car that kind of is preventing the cops from pulling
a
over the truck.
distraction,
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
So they get outside. Bandit pulls the car out of the 18-wheeler or whatever, the truck that Cletus and Fred, or Snowman and Fred, are going to be driving. And Cletus is essentially like gushing over the car. And then they go back and forth talking about the CB radios, essentially.
Yeah, and the thing is, what the funny thing with this movie made the Pontiac Trans Am a huge thing. I mean, to this day, I mean, the Bandit 1 is probably one, like, if you go to car shows, you could probably go every car show, you're going to find one. And it's crazy because when it came out, the owner of Pontiac, they're like, listen here, Mr. Reynolds, every year you will get a Pontiac Trans Am for free due to the success of this film. And obviously at the time he didn't need to buy one because he was like a very rich man. But he thought that was really awesome. So he said, the year went by and he's looking around. He's like, I think I need to call them up. I never got my car. So he calls them up and he's like, hey, I don't know if it was maybe delivered to one of my other houses or something like that. But
my other houses. Well, now it just sounds like a dick.
No, but he was I don't know. 70s Hollywood was a different time and place. I mean, he was
obviously.
Yeah, like the very, very well off. And he was sitting there, he's like, I guess, I don't know if you delivered to the wrong house or something like that. But as my knowledge, I haven't received yet. They're like, oh, you're not getting one. And he's like, excuse me. He goes, yeah, that was the old president. He no longer works here anymore. And the new president doesn't allow that. He's like, well, okay. And he goes, so I had to buy mine. I just thought it was a funny little story.
Yeah. So Bandit and Snowman go ahead and take off. So they're off to the road. Bandit pretty much spins out, takes off, and then Snowman's behind him. So they get going and they're like hauling butt.
And then the theme song kicks in, which is Jerry Reed. It took him. He was talking to Hal Needham, and he was like, "Hey, I'm looking at writing a song for the movie, so that's perfect. Okay, just let me know when you do it, and I'll take a listen to it." And literally, he said the next morning. That was at the end of the day. The next morning, he walks on set and he brings his guitar out. He goes, "This is what I got. What do you think?" And he starts playing it for Hal, and he's like, "Don't change one word. That's perfect." And it was literally, this is a Southern movie. Mind you, it grossed a lot of movie everywhere, but this really was the heart of the South in a motion picture. It just was. There's so much things in movies that you didn't get properly represented in the South, or there was so much negative about the South, especially during that time, because a lot of the South was looking at like to be very racist and stuff like that. But in this movie, it also shows where there are people of different, not just white people in the film, and they're all getting along. Like, I know it might be something as small as being in a restaurant and stuff like that, but especially when I moved up here, like I've met several people where they were just kind of like, "Oh, the South's all racist." I'm like, I don't know about that, to be honest, because like I found some characters up here that are worse than I've never been around people in my life like that. And I'm like up here and technically in the North.
Yeah.
I mean, if you can say South is technically it's the South, but whatever. But Maryland, I feel like is a northern state. But anyway, but yeah, like that was the big thing is like because at one point in time, Jerry Reed, they wrote the entire soundtrack to the entire movie. And when they got in post, they were actually going to pull it out and use a orchestra score with like strings and stuff like that. And Hal's like, get that shit off. No, we're not doing that because that's not what this movie is. And surprisingly, you didn't have a studio saying, well, we don't freaking care.
Yeah.
In today's time, it would be hard to get someone to say, okay, we'll do what you do, Mr. Unexperienced Director. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So then you get Bandit's first spotting, or a cop spots him when he's driving through the night through this kind of like small town, I guess you could say. And so ultimately they race through the town, and Bandit kind of like beats the cop. He goes into like a little dirt road behind a building and hides
Yeah.
for a second. And then the cop ends up just driving past anyway. And then you get that moment where Bandit pretty much breaks the
Fourth wall.
yeah, the fourth wall, and just looks directly at the camera
So that
with
was
like a sly look. Yeah.
Yeah, so that was Hal's idea. He goes, "What I want you to do." He's like, "I want you to keep on pulling the car up, and I want to tell you when I want you to stop it." And he tells him to stop right where he's dead front of the camera. He goes, "Now I want you to look at the camera and smile and drive off." And Bert's like, "You can't do that." He's like,
I love when people break the fourth wall.
but at this point in time, you didn't do that. That
Yeah.
was a big deal.
I know.
And the thing is, he was just like, mind you, he's like, he's his best friend. He's like, Hal, we can't do that, but I will do it. But I just want to like, you don't do that. And he's like, I don't care. It will send a message to the audience like, this movie is fun. The whole point of the movie was to
have fun.
Have fun. And he's like, he goes, I want comedy and action, not violence, but comedy and action, because action is fun. And I want people to just get excited in the theater and stuff like that. And that's what this is. This is like him looking at the audience like, you're in for a treat. This is going to be fun.
So you have your first cop encounter, and there's only one cop encounter before they make it to Texarkana. They pull up to the beer distributor, or it's a major liquor store. I don't know. That's not clear. And, well, they're closed, but they're on a time crunch. So ultimately, they're trying to get in, and Bandit just kicks in the door.
They break in.
They break in, essentially. He comes around, opens the garage door, and you get a moment where Bandit hops on a forklift to start moving the beers, and Snowman's standing on the forklift, asking if he knows how to drive this thing, and he's like, I can drive anything, or I can operate anything. I don't know the exact words. And in this back and forth, he ends up accidentally throwing Snowman over and on top of the beer cases. And it switches over, and they end up getting everything loaded up.
Yeah, their relationship in this movie is pretty good too.
Yeah, I like it.
And that, like, they worked on Gator together. And there's some really cool scenes with, like, where there's this really cool scene where Bert is riding on a truck, and they flip the truck over, but he has to jump off of the truck as it rolls. I'll put a clip here if I can find it, but it's really badass. And that's where it switches from, now it's like Neil being his stunt double. So they have a good rapport. They've worked together. I mean, Jerry Reed is a very funny man, and he's a very, very, very smart and well-trained musician. I mean, I'm not a big into country, but I can completely respect when someone is like hands down great musician. And he was a fantastic musician.
Yeah. So then Bandit has got to get a go on because he's the blocker. So, and he kind of switches from being like ahead of him to behind him to ahead of him behind him. But I do think the intention is for him to be ahead of him so he can spot what's coming. But he leaves Snowman to write a note that send the bill to Big Anos, Burdette. And Cletus is like, and he's trying to like repeat to himself slowly, like the name so he can spell it out correctly. And he's like, hell to this. I gotta go. I gotta go.
Yeah, he's trying to figure out how to write Burdette and how to spell it. He's like, hell with this. I gotta go.
Yeah. And he just throws the little notebook and jumps in the car and takes off. So they are now on their way back. So they went to Texarkana, and now they are on their way back to Atlanta. And as they're, weaving through to get through to Atlanta, Bandit comes up on a stopped, just married car on the side of the road. And a bride, or a woman dressed as a bride, in the middle, essentially hitchhiking. And he spins out in front of her, and she just throws all her stuff in the car and jumps in the car. And he's like, well, I'm not looking to get married. She's like, neither am I. Now move.
He's like, does this thing move? Well, yes, it does.
Yeah. So he takes off. And this is where you get introduced to Carrie, who is played by Sally Fields. I almost said Fisher. Whatever.
Carrie Fisher.
Yeah, it was a mix-up. So they move on, and Snowman ends up behind them. But before that happens, a truck pulls up to Carrie's broke down, just married car. And they pull out right in front of Snowman, and it's 3 teens, and they're trying to jack the tires and whatever else,
Yeah, they're
essentially.
stealing whatever's on the car on the side of the road, basically.
And as they're busy doing this, Sheriff Buford pulls up behind
Sheriff T. Justice.
Oh, yeah. Whatever.
Sheriff T. Justice Buford.
Yeah. Pulls up behind him, and I was telling Logan this, like, I don't get how they didn't, 1, hear a car pull up behind him, 2, hear the doors of the car close.
I will say, we say that, but how many times have we been riding in a parking lot, and you're like, you hear me behind you. Why don't you get some pep in your step?
I don't understand how people like that do it either.
I don't like especially like in the gym parking lot, I understand maybe they got headphones in, but still, like, you shouldn't be listening to your headphones in the parking lot.
Yeah. Either way, yeah. Either way, they don't notice that he is there until he flicks his lighter closed. So he's got one of those, like,
he's got
there's a name for him.
A Zippo lighter, and he flicks it closed. And he's like, this is the
weirdest scene in my opinion.
He just walks away. Jackie Gleason.
It's the only scene I don't like in this movie.
He is a comedy legend. And, like, literally.
I guess I missed the comedy part.
Oh, he's hilarious through the entire movie.
No, in this scene, it's he kind of annoys me in the movie.
Well, he's supposed to. He's supposed to be. He's an asshole.
But this scene, I'm like, this is just weird. It makes no sense. Like, his commentary to them, I don't know. I don't like.
No, the main point of this scene is just so we get a glimpse of who the bandit character is and which way they went, because they are the ones who saw the bandit drive off because they were waiting for her to leave so they could steal the shit.
Yeah.
Basically,
I understood that part. I'm just saying, I don't like his commentary to them. It's just stupid.
Yeah, I mean,
I was trying to say this nicely when I said I don't like the scene.
I mean, you don't have to say it nicely.
I usually don't, but.
But yeah, anyway, but yeah, so basically he interrogates them, kicks one guy in the groin, and ends up,
kicking one in the butt.
Yeah, and he basically tells them, he's like, hey, did you see a car come by here? Did you see a lady get in the car, blah, blah? And they're like, yeah. It went this way. He's like, do y'all got a license plate? And he's like, yeah, it said Bandit or whatever. And they went, Georgia plates. They went that way. He's like, all right, now I just want y'all to stay here so one of my colleagues comes along.
My associates.
My associates come along and make sure no one steals anything off of this car. He's implying, he's like, I know y'all steal.
And then he also proceeds to tell him, like, don't touch yourselves, don't move.
Don't go to the bathroom, don't get anything to eat, and don't touch yourselves.
Yeah. It's just a weird interaction. Anyway, so they take off, and their chase after Bandit now begins.
Yeah, so Sheriff is on his way to catch Bandit, and we get some little banter between Sheriff and Junior. And obviously, we know they're dressed up. Junior's wearing a tux, so that was his wife to be.
Yeah.
And we get some funny banter between them two. Like, obviously, Junior does not talk at all in the film. Really, he says a couple of words here, but Daddy.
Yeah.
And the funny thing was originally, Sheriff Buford was going to be by himself, but Jack Gleason was like, well, you got to give me somebody to talk to. I need to be able to talk to. I can't just sit there and talk to myself. Which I think was a good call because the Junior wasn't even a character to begin with in the movie.
Yeah.
So they created the character Junior for him to basically ramble off to. And literally, I don't know hardly if any of his lines were actually scripted.
Yeah.
Everything was just off the top of his head. And he, if you're not familiar with Jackie Gleason, the Honeymooners, that's humongous, big time show. Still funny to this day. There's some like in the movie later on, he actually says a line that kind of relates back to the Honeymooners. I'll talk about it when we get to it. But he starts rambling off how awful and disrespectful Carrie is for.
Yeah, them dancers coming to town. And
those dancers coming to town, shaking the old boobies and the old butts.
Yeah.
What's called, ain't nothing but straight communism.
Yeah.
This is a complete disrespect for my authority.
Yeah.
I thought it was hilarious.
And then he's upset that she wasted his $40 wedding. I'm like, I would have loved to have a $40 wedding. And we had a very affordable wedding. But $40. That's the cost of a wedding. People can just take the $40 from me. That's
Um,
crazy.
so now after that, we get our first cop chase since they're heading back with the with everything. Basically, Sally Fields sees a cop that's using the bathroom on the side of the road, and
She's like, would that interest you?
he's like, "Yes, it would."
Yeah.
It's funny. Burt Reynolds just so cool. The dialogue in this movie is perfect.
Yeah, we can't really touch on everything they've said, but it is just very good chemistry and back and forth between the two.
The chemistry is phenomenal, which during the process of this movie, they actually started to date. Because now there's rumors. Burt Reynolds stated that Universal did not want Sally Field in the movie, did not want her. He said that they wanted someone sexy, and they didn't consider her sexy. And that's when Burt put his foot down. He's like, listen here, Sally Fields is sexy. Her acting is sexy. Like her talent is what makes her sexy. Now there's also people that I believe Hal said, he goes, actually Universal wanted Universal wanted her, but I think Bert's going to take credit for that. And then it cuts, then Bert's saying that, whatever. But so, who's to say if they really wanted her or not? But obviously she ended the movie and she crushed it out of the park. Crushed it. But yeah, so they basically, we get this movie is just full of it's a car chase movie. You know what I mean? We talked about car chase movies and Death Proof and stuff like that. We listed Smokey and Bandit as being one of the best car chase films of all time. And it is really, it really is. It doesn't do some of the craziest stunts that are around, but some of the things that they do in the film are done very, very well, and it's seamless.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so he ends up basically getting chased by a cop car, and they're hauling ass, and he ends up like basically doing a donut or something like that. And while the cop tries to do the same donut, he ends up
going off a fishing pier
Yeah.
into a pond.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's funny when he gets out of that, he is like, I don't remember that curve being there.
Yeah. So they're back on the road again, and suddenly Bandit notices that there is a Texas sheriff on their tail, and he's a little bit confused because they're not in Texas anymore. And
they're in Arkansas, I believe, at this point.
Yeah. So he's like, he mentions, why would there be a Texas sheriff behind me? And immediately Carrie, as soon as that like leaves his tongue, maybe before, so she's like, I don't know. I don't know. And he's like, okay. So this time Bandit doesn't really take much to lose him. He just essentially speeds off and loses him that way.
Yeah, this time he just like basically puts the pedal down to the floor and just drives off. But yeah, when we were watching this, I looked over to Becca. I was like, her response where she was like, I don't know. I was like, that's you. That's dead on. Like, hey, how did this end up over there? I don't know. I'm like, did you put it there? I don't know.
Maybe. Maybe I forgot.
Maybe ask me later.
Yeah. Ask me tomorrow. Anyways, so now you kind of get this like cat and mouse thing, because then Sheriff Buford catches up with Bandit again. And this time, I keep forgetting his name. Snowman notices it, and he's like, hey, you have any idea why there's a Texas sheriff behind me? What's going on? Well, behind him.
Yeah.
So, Bandit gets up on Snowman. Snowman lets him around. Really, he makes his own lane around through grass and some mailboxes.
That's pretty cool. I love that scene where he just he bypasses because there's oncoming traffic. So he just bypasses, drives off on the curb, crashes through these mailboxes, and hops back on.
Yeah.
That's the kind of shit I love. Like that stuff. That stuff's awesome.
Yeah, so Snowman notices that right behind Bandit was a Texas sheriff. So he CBs him and asks if he has any idea. And essentially, Bandit's like, I don't know. Do you know Snowman? He's like, I don't know. And then he says again, is there a reason why there's would you happen to know why there's a sheriff behind me to Carrie? And she's like, I don't know. And then he's like, well, who the hell knows? Or whatever.
And that's when Cletus is like, I really don't know.
Yeah. And well, he also brings it up because the sheriff attempted to cut off Cletus's or snowman's semi, and he ends up sideswiping essentially and taking off one of the panels off of the sheriff's car.
Which that scene's pretty awesome because when when that happens, that is not how that stunt was supposed to be. But it ended up he was just supposed to get in front of him, but he slightly clipped him, and then that is the reaction of what happened, and they left it in the film because they thought it looked great.
Yeah.
And the stunt driver for the movie was talking to Hal. He goes, yeah, it looked pretty great. Didn't look great from my end, staring at the grill of a semi truck.
Yeah. So then the sheriff of Arkansas, where they're at now, CBs and has some words with Bandit and lets him know that there's a roadblock ahead. And
No,
pretty much,
not the sheriff. It's the trucker that's been
the
pulled
trucker
over.
that's been pulled over by the Arkansas
Yeah.
police is letting him know, hey, to give you a heads up, Bandit, his name's Silver something, there's a roadblock ahead. So just let you know. He's like, oh, thank you, you're great. And pretty much Bandit just blows through the roadblock. Or well, they try to like get ready to chase him, and in doing so, they unblock the road. So then he gets through anyway.
Yeah, and this is like the first time we get a look at like someone helping him out, because these are people that have CB radios and they're listening to him, and that's where he got that reputation, because as he would travel across the country, people would hear the bandit, bandit. And that's why when you go to these rodeos, oh, you're the legendary Bandit. That is why he's such a big deal. So it's cool to bring that aspect into the movie of, oh, these are people who know who he is. And it just grows and grows because everyone had been listening to this story over the past 28 hours.
Yeah. So when he does bypass the roadblock, it does ensue in another chase. And this time he goes down this dead end road that says bridge closed or whatever. And that's when the cops think they're going to get him, because they're like, oh, it's fine. He went this way. The bridge is closed. So he goes down the bridge. He pops a Yui because it's closed, but then sees the cops and he's like, oh, this one's worse. So then he turns around and ultimately jumps one cut off side of the bridge to the other cut off side of the bridge. But the cops don't manage to do the same. And they all slowly like plow each other over the bridge into the water.
Yeah. And this scene is iconic. I mean, it's up there with.
You also got the bear, whatever that guy's name, the actor from The Bear.
Oh,
his doppelganger. Right. Until he gets in the car and it's head on. Then it doesn't look anything like him. I know it's not him.
I know. I would say it's clearly like he doesn't look the same, but from that one angle.
Profile, yeah. When, as soon as the camera switches over and he's standing next to the officer, I'm like, oh my gosh, that guy looks just like the guy from The Bear.
But yeah, this scene is great because like, back in the days, like this is what sold movies. These car chases. This is what people wanted. I mean, freaking Dukes of Hazzard, the General Lee.
You got like 600 Fast and Furious.
Well, that's now, but there was a Fast and the Furious back then. That was a exploitation, genre film and stuff like that. You got.
I was just taking a jab at the fact.
That I know.
A bunch of Fast and Furious, along with Harry Potter's.
Well, yeah, but that's but with the car scenes, like. Watching this, and like obviously we talked about Death Proof and stuff like that. Like I will say, going back and rewatching Smokey and the Bandit, it does kind of make me like Death Proof a little bit more, because looking up all these behind the scenes and aspects of stuntman and driving and stuff like that, like it is super cool. Like you don't have to be, like I'm not, like I said earlier, I'm not a car guy, but you don't have to be a car guy to be like that's cool.
Yeah.
Now this isn't like some guy that you see at the 7-Eleven ramming his engine and taking off and like, all right, that's a douchebag. But this and a fictitious storyline of like someone who's just freaking, like I said, a good old boy. And a lot of people these days want to use the term good old boy as like being a bad term. I mean, technically back in those times, it wasn't a bad term. Like a good old boy was a well-liked individual that was more than likely not super educated, but was from a small town and was a very loyal person. So back then, to be a good old boy was not a bad thing. It was, like I could see, like, to be honest, like I would say, besides the education part, like I would consider my dad was a good old boy.
Yeah.
I mean, he growing up, he was like Burt Reynolds. You know what I mean? I mean, everyone liked my dad, but because he was such a good person and so nice. His kindness and his niceness, you couldn't help but like him because he just was I mean, he still is, but I'm just saying, like, he was just a good person, the best.
Yeah.
And that is the embodiment of what Burt Reynolds was. And that was the big thing is like at one point in time is Burt Burt was trying to do serious films right up to this point in his career. And he said, I don't want to always do good old boy movies. I want to do something that's different. And they were but I don't know if it was Barbara Walters that was interviewing him. They're like, well, let's say you won an Oscar for your next film. Well, what would you do then? And he goes, I mean, that's great, but that doesn't mean I'm gonna stop making these kind of films. I'll probably go right over and make another good old boy movie. He's like, because that's what I like to do. He's
Yeah.
like, I'm not saying that's all I can do because I can do a lot more. And that was the thing is a lot of people unfortunately did not respect Burt Reynolds in that form, like as far as films critics and
Mhm.
goes, but everyone loved him. So the critics might not they weren't taken over by him, but the public spoke louder than the critics.
Yeah. So now unfortunately Carrie has had her time and he's gonna drop her off at the choke and puke. Is that what they
That's what they
call?
call the choke computer. I'm guessing that's
It's a pit stop
but with a
essentially.
restaurant. It's a bus stop with a restaurant.
Yeah. Um yeah, I guess then that a pit stop I guess would just be a restaurant essentially. And maybe with gas. But so one, they gave her the name Frog beforehand because when he was cutting off Snowman's trailer, she was like, "I'm gonna die and I don't even have a handle." And he's like, "1 second, I'll think of one or I'll think of something up for you." And then he's like, "How about Frog?" And she's like, "Frog?" And he's like, "Yeah, because you're always jumping around or jumping from one to another."
Yeah, that was that was pretty
Yeah.
funny.
So he lets Snowman know, like, I'm gonna take a pit stop to drop Frog off. And this is where Snowman's like, "Oh, could you get Fred some burgers? Because he's looking a little thin in the skin." And like clearly the dog's fine. He's like,
Yeah.
"I'm a little worried about Fred. He's looking thin in the skin. Can you get him some burgers?" Which is something your dad would do.
Well, it's funny because that's the Fred in himself is a story. So apparently, Fred, they didn't want to pay for a dog handler and have all that kind of issue. So they didn't were going to get a professional trained dog. They're like, you know what? How about we do this? Well, you put an ad in the paper. What's called looking for scouting for new dog for next Burt Reynolds film. And they said the next day, the amount of people that showed up was ridiculous.
Oh, well, they picked a good one.
And they said basically Bert picked it out. I think they
Yeah.
said, and he was like, "All right, this is your new dog. This is Fred," which is it's a bass hound's like the best freaking dog.
Yeah,
It's-
especially for that kind of person.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
for Snowman and even Bandit. So, while Bandit is at the truck stop, he, drops Carrie off and asks her, "Are you gonna be okay? Are you gonna be all right?" And she's like, "I'll be fine." And she gets her bus ticket or whatever and is waiting. And he goes and gets his burgers and a large tea, I think, or whatever.
yeah, large sweet tea, and then that's when Sheriff Buford comes in.
Yeah, and it's just chaos. Just barks demands at the.
I need a Diablo burger and a large Dr. Pepper, and I need a snapper.
Yeah. Just pretty much like barks orders at her and doesn't even realize that it's Bandit next to him.
Well, they haven't seen each other.
Yeah. So pretty much Bandit hurries his way out of there.
He kind of
and-
talks to him a little bit, kind of gets his
Yeah.
like, he said there, he's like, you in a hurry, Sheriff? He goes, boy, you better believe it. I've been looking for this guy who nearly put,
You really love just reenacting it.
I do. He nearly put 20 police officers' lives in jeopardy. He ain't nothing but a menace
You done?
for now.
Until the next scene. So Bandit then scurries his way out, grabs the burgers, and what does he know it? But Carrie is whipped around and she's now driving the car. And he like jumps in, barely makes it in, and then she's going in the wrong direction. He's like, wrong way, wrong way. And she's like, oh, and then goes the right way. And now they are trying to like switch because Bandit's like, okay, I'll drive, you're done. And they can't like quite slide over top of each other and switch. So ultimately Carrie's stuck driving, but she also ends up being stuck driving on their next police
Yeah,
chase.
so basically, so they're stuck driving, and now we got the sheriff. He's back on their fucking tail.
Yeah.
I don't know how he catches up to him so fast, but anywho, so he's back on their tail, and right as they like, okay, this isn't going to work. We can't switch. We're going to have to keep on going. They see basically a steel beam that's being transported across the road on the back of a truck, and she hurry up whips it and goes on a dirt road and gets off on the main road. Well, unfortunately, Sheriff Buford and Jr. aren't that lucky. They hit that beam straight on and turns their car into a freaking convertible. That scene is so freaking cool. Like, I mean, literally, it's so cool. Like like, mind you, I saw this when I was little. So when we rewatched it, it'd been long. I'm talking about when I say little, I mean, there are movies when I was little that I watched with my parents. Superman, Smokey and the Bandit, E.T. There are just movies that were just
But yeah,
movies.
you have your family movies where everyone's willing to watch them. Everyone
Exactly,
enjoys them.
exactly. And then, but you know, at that time, I didn't really care for it because I wasn't into cars. But now that I'm a mature adult, like
Now that I'm mature, I really, really like them.
I'm
Vroom,
just,
vroom.
pretty much. And the scene is just when I watch, I completely forgot about this scene, and I'm just sitting there like, I just started busting out like, hot damn, Jesus, and it's like it's so. I don't know. That stuff I find because you don't know what's going to happen. It's like you plan for something, and my mind goes in the car. The stunt driver, like, all right, fucker, damn, let me hit it. You know what I mean, and not get my head tear off. I don't know. Sorry, I get excited. That scene's pretty exciting.
It's a very good scene. So now Sheriff catches back up, and this is probably like the very first line I think you actually get from his son, where he's like, "Daddy, my head blew off." And
I hope your damn head was in it.
Yeah, he's just mean. So they start to get a chase again, and this time, I think Carrie's still driving, right? I don't think
Yeah,
they
Carrie's still
switch.
driving.
Yeah.
She doesn't switch up until they give the burgers to
Yeah.
Fred.
So she's still driving and ends up like catapulting over an active football field where there's
Baseball field
where there is an actual game going on.
Okay, all right. So this scene.
Are you just gonna break down every car scene?
No, but this scene is kind of important. So
but this one, yes.
this scene almost stopped the movie. So that is not how that stunt was supposed to go. They didn't know that someone watered the field to make it look nice in the morning. So soon, and you remember when we were driving it, you're like, oh, that looks like a woman wearing a man wearing a wig. It was actually a female stunt driver. And that was actually her, like, there was the male stunt driver and the female stunt driver. And they both were in the cars at the same time because she looked like Sally Fields and he looked like Burt Reynolds. And that's literally her driving it. And it's not her fault at all. But what we see, if you rewatch this, I'll play it here. When you rewatch it, when she goes into the dugout, she was not supposed to hit the dugout. And the thing is, the two kids on the right and left side actually get hit by the car. You don't see them get hit by a car because they cut away. No, they didn't die. No one died on the making of the film. But unfortunately, like they almost got to the point where, like, you know, well, do we finish doing the movie? Because they were embarrassed because the thing is, when you're known for being a stunt driver, a stunt man, the most number one thing is safety. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the thing that you have your name as the most highest paid stunt man around making a movie with stunts. He wasn't
driving, she was.
I know. I'm just saying, like, it's one of those things where it's like, you know, you got a lot riding on that.
Well, yeah, I get that.
Because, you know, at any point that they felt like, you know, the studio can just pull the plugs. All right, well, we'll just sacrifice the $4 million we spent or whatever. But luckily they did not. You know, luckily the kids were not hurt. You know, there's some interviews with the kids who are like, we just saw the car going and we just tried to get out of the way because the car was not supposed to go there.
Yeah.
And that's why you see everyone like running out of the way.
Yeah.
Because that was literally people running out of the way. Yeah, kids weren't hurt, but yeah, that scene was a little rough for them. You know, because that made nationals news at the point.
You done?
Over.
Thanks. So while that happens, Sheriff Buford also gets held up by a funeral. So they're a ways behind him now. So Bandit and Snowman finally meet up on this little like near field with a pond. They trade, burgers and
Well,
drivers
there's
and
funny. It's funny when the Sheriff Buford actually show up to the field. And it's funny because Junior gets out and he's like, what can you see there, Junior? And he's like, Daddy, it's a football game. Can we stay? And
yeah.
it's a baseball game.
It definitely gives what was it? Is it no, it's not Little Nicky. What am I thinking about?
Dumb and Dumber?
No. It's an Adam Sandler film.
Oh.
Um
Waterboy?
No, what was the one we watched where he has the crush on the teacher?
Oh,
No. Waterboy, not the other one. But yes, it definitely gives like Waterboy vibes where it's like, what's wrong
you're not
with
Billy
this
Madison.
kid?
Yeah.
Yeah, not Billy Madison, my bad. No, Waterboy, where it's like, what's wrong with this kid?
Yeah.
Like, okay. Which that's not a jab, but when there's actually something wrong, it's just when there isn't something wrong and people are acting like it. So they stop, they trade things off, and Bandit and Carrie take off. And you get a scene where so are Snowman and Fred, but Fred has decided to go for a swim. So you pan over, and Snowman's trying to get Fred out of the pond.
And it's funny because, like, when you watch the scene, if you rewatch it, it's funny to see Fred is clearly been thrown in that water, and that dog does not want to be in that water because he's booking it to make it back to shore.
Yeah.
And I was just thinking, like, when you watch these kind of things, like, what's the dog thing? Like, get me out of this damn water. I didn't sign up for this shit.
Well, I know a lot of like films and stuff, older films have been like under siege for animal treatment.
Yeah. I think
like
Mile
that.
and Otis was a really rough one and
Yeah.
stuff like that. And I don't like to think about those things.
Yeah, I agree. So Carrie and Bandit start to bond and learn about one another. She asks him, what do you do? Are you a bandit? And just like random conversation because they're on a ride anyway.
Yeah, basically.
A long drive.
Yeah, you see a Bandit. He's like, well, what do you do? He's like, I do a little bit of this and that. Go here, go there, and just do what I do best. Well, what do you do best? Show off. Yeah. And that's funny because that bleeds into the sequel, Smokey and the Bandit 2, which the Smokey and the Bandit 2 has probably one of the most well-known like blooper reels and stuff like that. I can't remember what movie it was. Put in the comments. I forgot, but there's some movie where you're watching the end of the movie and it's a blooper reel, and they put the Smokey and the Bandit blooper reel in their blooper reel. I thought it's pretty funny. I can't remember if it might be like Anchorman or something like that.
Yeah. So Bandit ends up actually running to the sheriff at the gas station, and he's getting his car fixed. So at first, the sheriff doesn't realize Bandit is also at the same gas station until he pulls off, and then Sheriff is rushing to pretty much drive off to get him.
He's on a jack.
And drives off the jack onto another vehicle or something like that. So clearly he's not going anywhere just yet. But shortly after that, Bandit does run into another roadblock, but they get away by driving over top of the creek bed, which then the cop thinks he can do too, but floods his car.
Yeah, I like that scene. Because that's funny. Because that's the stuff I grew up with in the South. I didn't grow up around any lakes. We had creeks, Big B and Little B Creek, and stuff like that. And seeing that, I mean, I can just see that, what I'm saying, seeing that on the film, I could almost see that in real life because people used to drive their trucks all the way down to the creek bed, get up and try to fish and stuff like that. So I thought that was pretty cool, which is crazy. Those creek, that water's ice freaking cold.
Yeah, it's a creek.
I don't know. I would think that it wouldn't be cold because it's not as deep. So I'd feel like it would heat up from the earth much faster versus a lake. But lakes are warm and creeks are freaking cold.
Creeks will always be cold. And so he gets stuck and he gets to the, creek bed, whatever. And now the sheriff shows up to the roadblock late, essentially, and ends up getting hit by a truck.
Yeah, so like we said, people are helping.
Like a cat and mouse thing. But people are helping Bandit get a little bit further and a little bit further and a little bit further by letting him know what's ahead of him because these trucks are already ahead of him. Yeah. So he kind of already knows what's coming versus the sheriff has no idea what's coming. And anyone he has tried to force to let Bandit be his gives him pushback on it, essentially, because everybody wants a chance to catch the Bandit.
Yeah, and so it's pretty funny because the semi truck literally comes in and just drives and just rips the door right off on purpose.
Yeah.
And it's, the sheriff's freaking out, and he's like, I've got evidence. And
Yeah.
he's like, put the evidence in the car, Junior. And then he's holding the door, and he's like, put it in the back seat. And he's like, listen, this is one thing that he said. Was just,
yeah, to the other cop.
No, this is what he says to Junior, and it's really messed up. And this is kind of like the honeymooners. He said, there's no way you came from my loins. When I get home, I'm going to hit your mother right in the mouth. Because he's saying there's no way.
I get what you're saying. That she obviously cheated on me because
yes,
you're
and there's no way.
dumb to be mine.
Yes. When you say it like that, it sounds like you're angry.
Fuck, you're just very fixated on like the one character in this movie where I'm like, you're annoying.
But
and now I have to relive all of it through you reenacting it. Out of all the characters, I'm like, this guy gets on my nerves. And you're like, you want to hear another hour and a half of me reenacting everything this man did?
Well played. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
You want to hear that?
No. I'm glad we're on steps 11.
Oh, shit. Okay.
Anyways, yeah. So Snowman decides to make a pit stop at a like gas and bar type thing or whatever, or just a bar where you can get food and drink.
And you can tell like
looks like a motorcycle bar, which it is.
It's
off what happened.
It's basically a bar, but like it's cool because like they run into people that like, oh, like he knows the owner of that. He's like, hey, remember?
Well, because they're getting closer and closer to where they belong.
Yeah, they're getting closer to Georgia. And I love this scene because like he's sitting there, he's gonna call home, check in with the missus, and just let her know that everything's okay or whatever. And then he brings Fred in or whatever, and then you hear like the bikers have been kind of rough lately or whatever. And the guy's like, I don't know, I'm going to get out here before things get too out of hand. He's like, all right, well, I got to make a phone call. And then all of a sudden, as he's on the phone, you hear the bikers like, your dog bit me. And I'm like, really? Really? And he's like, Fred didn't bite. Do that, yeah. Fred didn't bite nobody. And then Jerry Reed, Cletus, ends up getting in a fist fight with them and gets the shit beat out of him.
Yeah.
And they throw him outside. And he gets in his car, and he's got blood coming from his nose. And he gets Fred back in the car.
He gets his food from the guy, the owner.
They apologize. It's not a big deal. And he drives off, and he sees their freaking bikes and runs right over them.
Yeah.
And it's funny because later Bandit checks in with Fred.
Over the CB.
Yeah, with Fred and
Snowman,
Cletus. Yeah.
And Snowman's just laughing. He's like, yeah, I got in a fight. I lost. Like every other one.
No, he goes, yeah, I got in a fight. He's like, oh,
how'd you, as good as I usually do.
No, he's like, how'd you make out? He goes, lost like I normally do.
Yeah. I mean, if you're going to be a loser at fights and every single one you get in, you might as well just accept it. Especially if you're going to continue to get into them, just accept it. But that's grace, the funny thing. It's just take your ass beating.
The funny thing is, he's like, yeah, whatever. It happens. It'll happen again. Whatever.
Yeah. So this also, in that happening, as we said, Bandit and Kira are getting to know each other, but they also find out that they like really don't have anything in common at all. Yeah, essentially.
It's because you see some banter in the car ride as they're talking back and forth, and he's like, "Hey, do you like so and so?" And she's like, "What's that?" He's like, "Well, it's this," because she's really into the theater. Yeah, she was a dancer. She was on Broadway for 12 minutes and so forth. And obviously, he's a good old boy, a country boy, you know what I mean? And that's the thing, she is not. She went into town because she was a dancer. Yeah. And that's why she was like, well, I don't know what to do with myself. I'm just going to get married to one of these good old boys, whatever. But what she regrets, because that's not what she wanted to do with her life, but yet finds another one and is like, well, I'm kind of smitten with him, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But yeah, their banter goes back and forth. But then she ends up asking, she's like, hey, like, because they're finding out, like, we don't really have a lot in common. Yeah. And she goes, hey, if we were on a desert island, do you think we get along? He's like, I think we get along. He's like, definitely be interesting. That'll be very interesting. So it's kind of like one of those things like, listen, like, we don't have to have things in common, but we get along.
Yeah, You know what I mean? So Bandit now gets a report from Smokey. Bandit gets a report from a girl named Foxy Lady on her CB radio about where Smokey is. Smokey being Sheriff Buford. I'm
Yeah.
just going to
So
call him. I'm
basically,
not going to say
yeah.
his whole name every time.
What's happening is like we have ladies of the night, if you want to call them,
Yeah.
that have a their
It's a truck stop.
It's a
and
truck stop
trailer.
trailer that I mean, but yeah, they are ladies that offer certain favors for money, and they basically have
Services.
services. There you go.
It's not a favor. You pay for it.
Whatever, you got it. But yeah, so they have found the cops that are waiting for them up ahead, and they have offered their goods, and they are taking it on it. But then while they're talking, you can tell Bandit gets the idea. He's like, because they're asking him, can you want to stop by when you make it here, Sarah? And they're like, well, I'm kind of pooped out. He's like, you sure? And he's like, you know what? I'll take that. And I'll meet you up at exit so and so. He's like, all right, we'll be here ready for you. But they're leaving a trap for Sheriff Buford because they're going to think he's going to be there when they pull up and they find out he's not there. So that part was pretty clever. I like
that. So Bandit ends up continuing to get help from other truckers. So they are like almost on the home stretch. They are on the highway now, but they are starting to get caught up again. There's another cop. So they are coming up on more truckers, essentially.
Yeah.
And they decide that they're going to let Bandit through, and they're going to kind of like disguise him in between the trucks.
So what they end up doing is
as the cops chasing him.
Exactly. So it's a two-lane highway, and obviously Bandit has got some lead on them. And what they end up doing is, as Bandit has the lead, a truck gets behind Bandit so they can't see him.
Yeah, they pretty much tuck him in there.
And then he replaces where the other truck. And what they're doing is they're just slowing down enough to where the cop is forced to go around, but as the cop forced going around, the other truck is hiding him behind the other truck,
behind him,
which is pretty clever and pretty cool. I like that scene a lot.
So unfortunately though, Snowman isn't as lucky, and he ends up getting pulled over for pretty much like the first time. And so he calls Bandit to let him know that he's going to need some help. So Bandit hurry up and turns around, and they whip up in front of Snowman and pop a Yui, and then Carrie flicks off the police officer, which then distracts the police officer, and he gives up on Snowman and takes off, essentially, to go after Bandit and Carrie. But during this chase, they are weaving everywhere, off exits.
Yeah, they're getting off on the exit of a highway, and a cop car is basically driving with oncoming traffic. And he ends up driving off the ramp, then launches himself onto the lower highway on the back of a flatbed truck, which is really crazy because when they did this initial stunt, when the cop launched itself hit the truck, it missed the truck, flipped a couple of times, and literally landed back on its wheels, and nonstop just drove back up, went back up the highway to do it a second time. Obviously they had to reset the truck or whatever, but literally just nonstop, we don't need a break. Let me just have the truck back up. And that's the second take that we get in the movie, which is pretty cool. Cause that kind of stuff, I don't know, it's really funny. Cause then when the cop cuts out, he's like, can you let me out on exit 37 or something like that?
So now we are actually in the home stretch, and they only have 4 miles to go, and they are making still decent times. They got a little bit behind there because intermittently, Bandit will check on the time and stuff with Snowman and things like that. So they're still making good time, and they only have 4 miles left.
Yeah, and then now we're in some trouble here because now not only do we have tons of cop cars that are chasing them, now we actually have helicopter. So not only they're not going to be able to hide themselves now, because now we actually have aerial support basically, and basically they're at to the point where they're going to throw in the towel, and they don't think they're going to be able to make it. Bandit's got the lead at this point, so he tells Snowman, he's like, that's it, we're not going to make it. We had a good run. And that's when Snowman's like, no. We ain't going out like this. We're beating this thing. So he takes the lead and gets in front of the car. And now they've made it back to the truck rodeo. And he plows through the basically roadblock that they have. And he turns that truck around so tight. I can't believe he doesn't flip it. Drives right onto the field, delivering the goods just in time. And they've got a little bit of a leadway because they need to get a quick, they get out there quick. And then they go up to is it Bertudas? I forgot what was their last name again?
Burdettes.
So they make it back to the Burdettes, and they made it enough time. They got 10 minutes to spare, and Bandit basically goes to him and is like, hey, I need two things from you now that we made it. And he's like, I need a car. He's like, that's fine. You can take my red Cadillac right there. He goes, and I need one other thing. I need the money. And then they're about to give him the money. And then that's when Little goes, how about double or nothing? And then Jerry's like, no, we'll take the money. And then Bandit's like, wait, hold on a second. What's this double or nothing? He's like, we would like some clam chowder from Boston. He's like, if you think you can make it all the way to Boston, we'll give you double or nothing. He's like, done. He's like, and then the big
all the way back there and back in 18 hours.
All right, y'all. I looked this up. That's impossible because it takes at least 17 hours to get to Boston.
Yeah.
So I'm guessing that's what it meant there and back because that is impossible.
Yeah.
But I thought it was kind of funny. Because once they said that, I was like, well, is this even possible? Because I didn't even do the math on, the other part of the movie, but I was just like, let me see. I'm like, oh, because I knew Boston's far from us, but all the way in Georgia.
Yeah.
But yeah, so, they end up getting away, and they get a little run in with the sheriff. They see him and they're on top of like a little bit of a driveway hill, and they see the sheriff below. And they can tell that, obviously he's trying to figure out where the bandit is, and he hits him on the CB. And basically the bandit kind of starts he actually does say some nice things to him. He's like, he goes, listen here, Sheriff, if I could be frank, you must be part coondog because no one's ever followed us this good. And I mean, no one. And he's like, well, for me to be, okay, I'll stop. With me to be frank, this is the sheriff because Becca doesn't like the impression. This is the sheriff speaking. But for me to be frank, as the pursuee, he's like, you have been the most difficult pursuer that I've ever had to pursue or whatever. And they basically, Bandit's going to try to kind of like label the Enos brothers as Smokey and the Snowman and the Bandit or whatever. And he's like, you know what? I can't do that to you. Look over to your right. And then that's when he's like,
yeah, and he peels off.
Yeah, he peels off. Which is, it's a great ending, And then at the very end, you get Carrie saying, I'm sorry for the wedding, Junior. No hard feelings. Oh.
But yeah, so that's the end of the movie. They end up peeling off, and that's it.
Yeah, they drive off into the sunset or whatever.
All three of them. And I think
all four of them.
Snowman makes a comment that he's going to get divorced.
Yeah, he goes, I'm going to be divorced.
Yeah.
Well, his wife's going to divorce him, from not being home. Stuff like that.
But all around, it's a good movie. It's enjoyable to watch. Like I said, I would rewatch it. This was the first time I watched it. And then the second time, obviously, before we did this. But yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed it. It's funny, and I like all the different relationships in it.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, honestly,
besides Sheriff Buford and Junior, I like every relationship in it and how they all kind of complement each other.
And that's one thing, like I said, like I put the tagline, is this an American classic? And I hands down think this is truly an American classic. 1977. Okay. This is the second highest grossing film of that year. The film that was the number one grossing was Star Wars. So to be number 2 behind Star Wars is pretty incredible.
Yeah, and it's a household name. I mean, even if you haven't watched it, you've heard of it and you get the gist of it. So yeah, I mean, I would say it's definitely a classic.
And Burt Reynolds is a cool dude.
Yeah.
He is funny. He's charismatic. Watch the blooper reels and stuff like that. It's him, real time, talking to Sally Fields, and he's so kind. Like, people are messing up. He's like, "That's all right. We're doing great. We're doing great. Let's just do it again. Let's just do it again." And like, that's people would say, like, mind you, everyone's going to have their bad days.
Well, yeah.
There's I don't know if it was David Letterman show, but there's a famous interview with him and Mark Summers where he like goes off on Mark Summers because he felt like Mark Summers was being like disrespectful for him. And that was one thing they did say is like, he is a very respectable man, but they did say like, he doesn't take jokes, make it at other people's expenses.
Well, yeah.
He won't fly for that, and he'll set you in your place if you do something like that.
Yeah.
I feel like that's what was happening during that interview. But besides that, like, people loved him. I mean, I was watching, he was on daytime TV, and there's this video. If I can find it, I'll put it here, where this woman looks him up down the aisle, and she's older, much older. And, he leans down and kisses her. And like, what she didn't know, he was going to kiss her on the lips. But the funny thing is, you see her best friend or friend behind her, whatever, shove the crap out of her back. Like, you're like, you just kissed Burt Reynolds.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not like, I don't use the word God or anything like that, but that is a legend. That would be, I would really say, the proper definition of a legend.
Yeah.
Just a great dude. And, yes, his made a shitload of films. Never was like, I was unfortunately in his life, he never really like was looked at as being like that guy, like the Marlon Brando, even though people like when he was younger years, they referred to him as like, they say he looks just like Marlon Brando. And there's a crappy story where he actually met Marlon Brando one time, and like he was just so disrespectful for him, like didn't even acknowledge his existence. And he went to shake his hand, he wouldn't even shake his hand. And it was like that. It sucks because that was early in his career, and everyone was telling him, like, you look like Marlon Brando, you look like Marlon Brando, you can be the next Marlon Brando, and stuff. And the guy was just like, oh well, he was just so shitty about it. And Marlon Brando's he's not known for being the nicest person in the world.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, like I said, the tagline of the show, is it a cult? Is it an American classic? Yes, it is, 100%.
Yeah.
And if you haven't seen it in a long time, or you haven't seen it at all, I definitely go back and watch this. You're gonna have a good time. It just oozes fun. And it's one of those movies like you can rewatch it. The cleverness is funny. The dialogue is great because it's just natural occurring dialogue between individuals trapped in a car for 90% of the movie. You know what I mean? It's awesome. I'll stop talking about it there.
Yeah, I don't really have much else to say. Like I said, I enjoy it. I definitely think it's a classic as well. And I would rewatch it. I don't really have other input besides that.
Yeah, like I said, it's, we've said everything you can say about it. All I can say is like, go, if you haven't seen it, go see it.
Yeah, and if you have seen it, definitely rewatch it. In my opinion, it's worth rewatching. But yeah, so that is episode 39 for you guys, is Smokey the Bandit, an American classic. We vote yes, but definitely feel free to share your thoughts in the comments as well. You can find us on all your social medias. If you're looking for easy links, if you go to videovillaentertainment.com, we have our website there, and you can access a lot of our social medias through there, as well as our episodes. You can watch and listen. Definitely don't forget to like and subscribe, as well as leave us a review to tell us, how much you love us. But yeah, so thank you guys for listening. Do you have any farewells?
You did it.
I covered everything this time.
Yeah, everything.
All the likes, the follows, the rates, the subscribes.
Yes, you did everything.
All right. Got my checklist down this time. Getting better. 39 episodes in, and we're getting better.
Hey, next episode's going to be 40.
40.
All right.
I know. We are how many away from? We are 60 away from 100.
Yes.
Quick math. But yeah, thank you guys for joining us today, and we will see you for episode 40.